They say greed is a poison, but what if it could awaken something far worse? What if the gold you desperately sought was cursed by the very earth it came from? This is the story of the Whispering Vein Mine, a place swallowed by the mountains, and the cursed treasure that should have been left buried forever. For centuries, local legends spoke of a mine rich with gold, but guarded by an ancient curse. The native tribes warned that the mountain was a sacred burial ground, and anyone who disturbed its slumber would unleash a terrible darkness. They called the gold Sorrow's Shine, believing it held the trapped cries of their ancestors. Anyone foolish enough to steal it would be haunted by their whispers, driven to madness and despair. For generations, this story was enough to keep prospectors away. The fear of the curse was more powerful than the allure of wealth. But as the old world faded and a new one rose, a man named Silas Croft arrived, a man whose greed was deaf to warnings. Silas Croft was not a local. He was a man forged in the unforgiving furnaces of the industrial age, a man who believed in iron, steam, and the power of a dollar. He scoffed at the superstitious nonsense of the local tribes. To him, the stories of a curse were just tales to scare away competition. He saw the mountain not as a sacred tomb, but as a vault waiting to be cracked. He bought the land for a pittance, hired a crew of desperate men who were either too brave or too foolish to believe the legends, and blasted open the entrance to the long-sealed mine. They named it the Whispering Vein, a mocking nod to the local folklore. The first few weeks were deceptively successful. The crew hit a vein of gold so pure and brilliant it seemed to glow with its own inner light. The men celebrated, their pockets heavy with nuggets, their minds filled with dreams of the fortunes they would build. Silas was hailed as a genius, a visionary who had stared down superstition and won. The gold flowed out of the mountain, and the town at its base began to boom. But as the miners pushed deeper, the mountain began to push back. It started subtly. Tools would vanish from where they were left, only to reappear in impossible places. The flicker of lanterns would cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to dance and writhe on their own. And then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, like the sigh of the wind through the tunnels. But soon, they grew clearer. Men would hear their names called from empty caverns. They'd hear soft, mournful cries that seemed to echo from the very rock around them. The miners, once boisterous and confident, grew quiet and withdrawn. Their eyes darted nervously into the darkness, and they started working in pairs, never alone. One evening, a young miner named Thomas ran screaming from the mine, his face pale as a ghost. He claimed he saw a woman, her form misty and translucent, standing at the end of a tunnel. He said she was weeping, and as he got closer, her face contorted in rage, her silent scream echoing in his mind. No one believed him, at least not openly. Silas Croft, furious at the disruption, publicly fired Thomas for drunkenness and spreading fear. He warned the rest of the crew that any talk of ghosts would result in the same. The work had to continue. The gold was too valuable to stop now, but the incidents escalated. A heavy support beam collapsed for no reason, narrowly missing a group of workers. The pump system that kept the lower levels from flooding mysteriously failed, and 2 men were trapped and drowned in the rising, murky water. After their bodies were recovered, the other miners swore they could hear their desperate shouts for help echoing from the flooded chamber even after it was sealed off. The whispers in the mine grew louder, more personal. They weren't just mournful cries anymore. They were taunts, promises of despair, digging into the darkest fears and regrets of each man. The curse of sorrow's shine was taking hold. The men who had taken the gold found their lives falling apart. One man lost his entire fortune in a single night of gambling. Another's wife and child fell gravely ill with a mysterious sickness that no doctor could diagnose. The miners, once united by their shared hope for wealth, were now consumed by paranoia and suspicion. They accused each other of theft and sabotage, and fistfights became a common sight in the mining camp. The gold, which once promised a bright future, now seemed to carry a heavy, invisible weight. It brought not joy, but misery. Silas Croft was immune to none of it, though he tried desperately to hide it. He was plagued by terrible nightmares. He dreamed of being buried alive, the weight of the mountain pressing down on him, the whispers of the dead screaming in his ears. He started spending his nights in his office, a bottle of whiskey his only companion, a loaded pistol on his desk. He refused to halt the mining operation, convinced that if he could just extract enough gold, he could buy his way out of whatever darkness was closing in around him. He doubled the men's wages, hoping to buy their loyalty and silence. But money was no longer enough to quell their mounting terror. The breaking point came during a fierce winter storm that trapped the entire night crew inside the Whispering Vein. The entrance collapsed under a massive avalanche, sealing them in. Rescue efforts began immediately, but they were hampered by the storm and the unstable rock. For 3 days, rescuers could hear the faint, desperate banging from within the mine. But on the 4th day, the banging stopped. An unnerving silence fell over the mountain. When the rescue team finally broke through, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. The mine was empty. Not a single body, not a single tool, not a single trace of the dozen men who had been trapped inside. It was as if they had been swallowed by the rock itself. All that remained was a freshly exposed vein of gold, gleaming mockingly in the rescuers' lantern light. In the wake of the disaster, Silas Croft finally broke. He was found wandering the slopes of the mountain, his clothes in tatters, muttering about whispering ghosts and gold that screams. He had lost everything: his fortune, his sanity, his men. The Whispering Vein mine was officially condemned and sealed, this time for good. A heavy iron gate was placed over the entrance, a stark warning to any who might be tempted in the future. The town that had sprung up at the foot of the mountain withered and died, becoming another ghost town in the vast, lonely wilderness. To this day, the mountain holds its secrets. Locals say that on quiet nights, if you stand near the sealed entrance of the Whispering Vein, you can still hear them. The faint, mournful whispers of the miners, trapped forever in the darkness, and the sorrowful cries of the ancient spirits whose slumber was so violently disturbed. The cursed gold remains deep within the earth, a glittering trap waiting for the next greedy soul foolish enough to ignore the warnings. Some treasures, they say, are meant to stay lost, and some places are best left undisturbed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales from the shadows. Stay curious and stay safe.